This is the WinGear helical and bevel-helical gearbox configurator, which calculates the optimum gearbox offer based on the entered values. The more information you fill in, the more accurate the solution will be. Select the type of gearbox you require, either helical or bevel-helical. In our case, we decided to use the bevel-helical. Pressing the Change Shaft button will open a menu of icons with the available shaft configurations. It is also possible to select a design with the position of a bevel-helical pinion from above. The speed value of the high-speed shaft, i.e. the shaft at the gearbox input, must also be entered, as well as the speed value of the low-speed shaft, i.e. the shaft at the gearbox output. If a value outside the WinGear catalog range is entered, a warning triangle will appear. Clicking on the triangle icon will display a detailed description of the alert. The gear ratio is calculated from the above shaft speed values. In the subsequent specification, only one of the selected options is entered. The other two values are always calculated automatically. Simply enter the required motor power. Leave the field with the cursor in the space outside, while the remaining values will be automatically calculated after a mouse click. Don't try to fill in all fields in this part of the configurator. The configurator is set to the metric system by default. However, we can also convert the units to another measuring system. You select the industry and driven equipment in which the gearbox is to operate. This is necessary in cases where we do not know the value of the safety factor. If you require a gearbox without a lubrication unit, you must fill in the following 4 fields. Choose the percentage per hour in which the machine will be in operation. Choose the ambient temperature, average percentage of motor power utilization, and the last value of airflow speed. You should also determine how many hours a day the machine will be in operation. After this selection, the configurator automatically recommends the application factor. If you know the value of the application factor, please fill it in. The following parameters affect the load on the gearbox: number of starts per 1 hour, machine startup options, the number of static shocks that can occur on the output shaft in 1 hour, the value of the shock torque from the driven machine. Now you can set or enter the angle value of the gearbox tilt in the machine. This can be set by moving the cursor or entering the value directly in the angle field. Next, you should select the gearbox mounting which corresponds to the machining of the housing. The variants are shown in the Help button. Select the desired one from the list. Choose the design of the high-speed and low-speed shafts. You can also choose whether the gearbox will be operated in a dusty or explosive environment. Choose the climate in which the gearbox will operate and select the altitude. If you know that external forces will act on the gearbox shafts, you should complete Section 4. We will use an example with an axial force on a slow-speed shaft, where we first determine the direction of the force and then fill in its value. Now we can start the calculation by pushing the Calculate button. A menu of several options of gearboxes appear. Option A is the manufacturer's most recommended catalog variant of the gearbox. The difference between A and B is the gear ratio, which is the closest required in Option A and the second closest required in Option B. Options C and D differ from A and B by the value of the safety factor, Ka. These are smaller gearboxes with lower bearing life and, as a rule, lower safety than required by the customer. Their cooling factor can be less than 1, in which case it cannot be guaranteed that the gear unit will cool itself. The guarantee of optimal cooling only applies to a cooling factor greater than 1. We do not recommend choosing C or D without the appropriate technical knowledge. The difference between C and D is governed by the same gear ratio rule as with A and B. After the configuration of the gearbox option, the key parameters and the corresponding dimensional drawing of the gearbox are displayed. Special requirements can be written in the note field, for instance, the required paint color of the gearbox housing. In the last part, we have the option of configuring accessories for the required gearbox. The data from the selected gearbox can be generated into a PDF file. The PDF file contains a complete overview of the gearbox parameters, including a dimensional drawing. By pushing Request Quotation and after filling in the contact data, the message will be sent directly to the Wikov sales department, which will then contact you. WinGear.